Hello, I'm Anthony Bardaway. I'm here at the Defense and Security Conference in Kiev. With me today is Ingvar Pärnamäe. He is the CEO of the Estonian Defence Industry Association. He's here to talk to us about NATO integration and some of the economic deals being made between Estonia and Ukraine in that direction. So, welcome. Thank you. So, both Estonia and Ukraine obviously have a very close history together. They're once part of the same country, although that wasn't fully recognized, but that's history. So Estonia made the jump from being part of a Sovietized military system to what's now NATO. And Ukraine's trying to do the same thing. What are some of the very highlights, what are the important steps that Estonia took to reach that point?
I think the most important thing is to have a very clear understanding where you want to go. So, and this understanding has to be as broad as possible, so across the whole society. So it can't be just the government's agenda or agenda for a very small group of people. Then it won't work. But what always works is that if the whole society agrees that this is a direction we want to take. We want to integrate with Western society, we want to integrate with Western organizations, etc. So then it can make things happen. And I think what happened in Estonia and also in other Baltic countries was a very clear understanding that we want to become members of both the European Union and NATO. And that gave us a good direction for our government, a good direction, and everybody understood where we have to go. And even though we lacked a lot of, basically nobody had any experience of doing things, but understanding where you are going sometimes is even more important than having a good knowledge about what exactly you are doing.
So you really focused on like the all of society aspect of it rather than just these specific guideline points.
I think all the specifics come later. So first of all, it has to be a very broad agreement at a very high political level, and through elections and all the parliamentary system, you get to the point where you agree that okay, this is where we want to take our country, and on that you can build all the other elements of society, from agriculture to environmental protection to defense, etc., etc. So all these details come together later, but before you start moving, you have to know where to move in general, and because there are huge differences between what we saw in Soviet Union, how society worked in Soviet Union, and how the Western world works. So, and this is not an easy jump for a country to move from one system to another system, and it needs time. It needs good understanding that some painful transformation is ahead of you, and everybody agrees that a certain pain has to be accepted because things cannot otherwise be changed, and that what I think happened already in the early 90s in Estonia, that this kind of agreement was there. Majority of political parties understood that the Western integration is the most important direction for the next decade or so for Estonia, and then the rest followed.
So you feel as though Estonia got its growing pains out of the way early on, whereas Ukraine is just doing them now. But what were some of these more strenuous growing pains that Estonia went through at this time, do you think?
I think the biggest pain always is between your ears. To start think differently is extremely difficult, and to do things differently takes time. And in order to get all those systems in place, processes working, it takes a long time. And what all else was very painful, I think, was what we in Estonia call a reform of ownership. So that definitely was very painful because Estonia was restored as...
So was it basically a privatization effort?
It was based on a republic which we had before Second World War. So we made a continuous progress from there. So we said that we don't have a new republic, we have we have had occupation period, but we still continue the same republic which we had before Second World War. So which meant that all these ownership relationships had to be restored as well as they were there before Second World War happened. And that meant very painful cases where people had to get back their lands which were forcefully taken away from them. But in reality, somebody already lived in these properties in the early 90s. So all these kind of compensation mechanisms, how newcomers got their pain compensated, and how the old owners got their things compensated. That was a huge process, and it took a long time. But I think from a philosophical point of view, it was extremely important to show the continuity of Estonian Republic, that we were not
such as washing away the Soviet Union entirely.
Because that's a fundamental of Estonian Republic, to show that we were legally occupied. We were not part of Soviet Union voluntarily. We were not part of the system on our own will. And that's one of the examples how it turned to be painful in reality. But it was necessary pain, and right now I think systems work more or less so.
Which brings up the very obvious difference between Estonia and Ukraine in this example, is that independent Ukraine was extremely short-lived, while Estonia lasted
also very short time.
Comparatively, though, longer.
From 1918
it was much more established.
To 1940.
It had control over its own territory for that time, whereas Ukraine was not. Yeah. And then also size issue. Estonia is much smaller, roughly the size of Kiev.
Yeah, probably.
Yes.
But it doesn't matter, because the principal processes are similar. It doesn't matter how big your country is or how small you are. In order to establish a fully functional democratic country, there have to be systems in place. And we have seen it also through NATO and European Union integration, where we found out that it doesn't again matter how big or small you are. You have to have certain things in place, and to have your own independent country might be sometimes a very expensive thing, and you have to establish certain mechanisms which are elsewhere in place in Europe and you didn't have, and that creates always tensions and questions that, are we doing the right thing? Do we really need to have these kind of things? Yeah.
So that your point being is that just joining NATO, it can't just be a standalone goal. It has to be a much more societal effort.
Exactly. The whole society should becoming part of the overall Western system. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And this label of being a member in NATO remains empty. But Estonia has always said that we don't want to be just members somewhere, but we want to be full members everywhere we go. So full members in European Union, in NATO, everywhere. So if we are members, then we take part of everything. We send our troops to NATO missions. We contribute more than 2% to national defense, which is a huge issue in NATO, etc., etc. So we wanted to show that we take it seriously. So once we decide something, then we really do it. And I think so far Estonia has fulfilled its commitments.
Okay, and to narrow our discussion a bit now, is the purpose of this forum is a lot of it has to do with various manufacturers, trade, that sort of thing. So what are some of Estonia's interests in Ukraine right now from an economic trade point of view as far as the military industry is concerned?
Of course, Ukraine is not very far from Estonia. It takes only 1.5 hours to fly from Tallinn to Kiev. There is a long historical similarities what we have behind us. So Ukrainian market has been always attractive to Estonian economy and Estonian companies. So it's, I think, rather natural that also in defense industry, our companies are looking at Ukraine. That are there any business opportunities between our countries? And I'm really happy to say that there are first companies who already have been active on defense market here in Ukraine for some time, looking for opportunities and talking to different companies who are here in Ukraine in order to help Ukraine to get better products which Ukrainian armed forces or law enforcement forces can use. And we'll see. There have not been yet very big and drastic contracts, but I'm pretty sure that over the time there will be some significant cooperation between some of our companies.
And the ProZorro program, with granting these tenders for if the military wants to purchase X number of tires for armored personnel carriers or something like that. How are Estonian companies actively looking into these right now?
Here in Ukraine? Or?
In Ukraine, yes. To sell it to Ukraine, yeah.
Yeah, Estonian companies are looking, of course, actively the opportunities in areas where they are strong, and Estonian companies are typically very small, and they are focusing on specific niches, and main areas where these kind of interactions so far have been taking place are related to drones, cyber defense, and things like that. So I would describe altogether as smart solutions in robotics or in cyber defense. So this is where our companies are active, and hopefully something will come out.
So not necessarily manufacturing, but these very high-tech, high-cost sometimes items that might only take a small team to make, like that kind of thing.
And in cyber world, you don't even need to manufacture
yes,
anything.
Of course.
So you simply need to program things, and also there is hardware involved. But even more is a knowledge how to set up systems and what exactly it is you need in order to be sure that you have a really working cyber defense system in a country. And this is something what our companies do have, because exactly during this week, as we are here 10 years ago, Estonia was under cyber attacks, and a lot of strange things happened in Estonia during that time, but the positive side of it has been that many companies who are now active in defense, cyber defense world are based their knowledge on that experience 10 years ago, and which is very important, because if you have a real experience with you, then this gives much higher validity to your claims and to everything you do. So therefore, I think it is extremely important to use these kind of sometimes not so positive events in order to use opportunity and to make it into your favor instead of damaging you.
So there does seem to be some disparity between what happened to Estonia. There's a protest against taking down a statue, which led to the complete takedown of the Estonian internet, essentially, while Ukraine is actively at war with Russia, essentially, but there have been major cyber attacks on the energy grid, for example, but not to the same extent as Estonia. So are Ukrainian cyber defense people using Estonian knowledge to prevent those kinds of attacks from happening, or is the attention not being given to it the same way?
You have to look everything in a right perspective and in a concrete time frame. So when Estonia was attacked 10 years ago, then it was the first country ever to be attacked as a country, and it hadn't been done before. It was later on repeated in Georgia in 2008, 1 year later, etc., etc. So also against Ukraine when things went wrong here. Therefore, we can say that it all links together here also in Ukraine finally, because we were tested. We were like a test bed for cyber attacks. Georgia was a test bed for something else, and now those experiences which Russia got from these things obviously are used against Ukraine now here. So it all plays together. If nothing hasn't happened, it's a good question. I don't know. Is it really the reason that nobody hasn't tried really to take down a power plant, for example, or are the systems good enough to prevent all that? We don't know, and probably specialists are in that field good to talk about that if they can. But anyway, I think what we need to understand is that the current war is extremely complex, and it's not only a traditional military way of doing damaging things, but also it happens equally on a cyber world, and we need to pay a lot of attention to that part of life as well. And there are still countries in the world who actually don't understand the importance of these kind of things, and therefore it is possible that these kind of huge cyber attacks sometimes occur, and you still have a lot of computers out there in the world which can be used as zombie computers attacking somebody. So there's a long way to go still in order to really get better prepared environment at global level at cyber defense world.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Today with us was Ingvar Pärnamäe. He's the CEO of the Estonian Defence Industry Association. He talked to us about some of the cooperation between Ukraine and Estonia, especially in the defense industry. Thank you very much for being with us today.